The city didn't notice them, not in the morning rush when commuters flooded the streets, nor in the sleepy haze of dusk when the streetlights buzzed to life. Eli and Naomi moved like shadows between moments, quiet and unnoticed, surviving the corners no one looked at anymore. Eli was 12 years old, but his eyes had the wear of someone far older. He walked with a wary awareness, always scanning, always calculating. Naomi, only 8, trailed behind him like a whisper, clutching a threadbare stuffed rabbit with missing ears and matted fur. They had been on their own for almost 5 months now, long enough to know which dumpsters yielded better leftovers, which corners of the city stayed warmer at night, and which faces to avoid. Their parents had died in a car accident at the end of winter. No extended family had come forward. At first, the authorities placed him in a foster home, but it hadn't taken long for Eli to sense danger. He'd heard the whispers, seen the bruises on another kid's arm, watched how the foster father's smile didn't reach his eyes. So one night, when the house was asleep, Eli took Naomi's hand, and they ran. Since then, they drifted, sleeping in alleys behind grocery stores, even once in a laundromat until a worker kicked them out. But the library, they had discovered the library almost by accident. It sat on the edge of the old district, a brick building with ivy crawling up one side and paint peeling off the windowsills. During the day, it was quiet but open, warm enough in winter, cool in summer, with clean water in the restrooms and long rows of books that Naomi loved to touch even if she couldn't always read the words. But what made the library special was what happened after it closed. Eli had noticed that the library staff, older and understaffed, often failed to double-check every corner before locking up. There was a small space in the children's section behind 2 bookshelves that, if you crouched just right and held still, allowed you to vanish. And once the lights turned off and the doors were locked, the silence took over, wrapping them in a strange kind of peace. Each night, once the last footsteps faded and the alarm system beeped its final tone, Eli would slide out from hiding, gather the backpack they stashed during the day, and set up camp. Naomi would curl into a sleeping bag they found in a church donation bin, her rabbit tucked under her chin. Eli would stack books into a makeshift wall around them, just in case. Then he'd lay beside her, staring into the dark ceiling high above, listening to the creaks of the old building settling into the night. Sometimes they whispered. Naomi would ask about their mother's voice, about whether Dad had ever read the book she'd found about lions, about what school might feel like. Eli answered when he could, and when he couldn't, he made up stories. They washed in the bathroom sink when they could, careful to leave no trace. During the day, they'd blend in with other kids sitting on the floor, reading picture books. Naomi was small enough to look like a visitor's child. Eli moved with purpose, always watching for cameras or curious eyes. But as August faded and September approached, the nights grew colder. The tile floors that once felt cool and smooth now bit into their skin with a chill that made Naomi's breathing wheeze. Eli wrapped his hoodie around her chest tighter and added books to the base of the makeshift bed to raise off the ground. But it wasn't enough. He counted the days, counted how long they could stay hidden, counted the cans left in their bag, the socks without holes. He had been proud of how careful they had been. No one had noticed. No one had asked questions. They were ghosts, and in a world that had turned its back on them, invisibility was safety, but that safety came with a weight. Eli's shoulders ached from always being tense, his ears always alert. Naomi coughed more in the mornings. Her once bright giggle had quieted. He knew they couldn't last like this through the fall, let alone another winter. Still, he told himself each night that tomorrow would be the same, that the old library would protect them for one more day. Until the night that changed everything. It started with a noise, not the usual groans of an old building, but a hum of distant traffic. It was a sharp, sudden clatter, something metallic, followed by silence so complete it made Eli sit up straight in the dark. He held his breath. Naomi stirred beside him, half asleep, murmuring his name. "Shoo!" he whispered, instinct taking over. He strained to hear, every muscle tight. The sound came again, downstairs this time. Faint footsteps, a flashlight beam sweeping briefly against the far wall. Eli's pulse quickened. Someone was in the library. at this hour. He reached for Naomi, pulling her close, her rabbit pressed tightly between them. He didn't know yet who it was or what they might want, but he knew this. Their time in the shadows might be over. Raymond Tucker had worked as a janitor at the Oak Ridge Public Library for over 20 years. To most who passed him in the hallways or glimpsed him through glass-paneled doors, he was just another quiet custodian pushing a mop bucket or fixing a flickering light. He kept his head down, his shirt tucked in, and his schedule exact. He preferred it that way, routine, silence, and solitude. After all, libraries were meant to be quiet. He liked things that stayed in their place. He didn't need conversation. He didn't need people. Or at least, that was what he told himself. But lately, something had been off. It began as a flicker in his periphery, a soft shift of light in a hallway that should have been still, a sound in the vent that didn't match the rhythm of the old building settling, a smell of something faintly sweet, like apples, lingering too long in the air after closing. He chalked it up to the age of the building, or maybe his own nerves acting up again. But then came the footprints. Tiny, dusty outlines near the back of the children's section, where the cleaning crew never left traces. One night, while sweeping after closing, he noticed a half-eaten apple tucked behind a row of encyclopedias. Not moldy, fresh. He stood there a long moment, holding the piece of fruit in his gloved hand, the air cold against his neck. He knew the staff didn't bring food into the stacks, and kids weren't allowed in after hours. Something was wrong. Raymond began locking up with more care, double-checking the stairwell doors, walking through every aisle before switching off the lights. He didn't tell Ms. Harris. The library director didn't tolerate distractions. If he told her he was hearing things, seeing things, she'd raise an eyebrow and add a note to his file. He couldn't afford that, so he watched and waited. 3 nights after the apple, just after 11 o'clock, he returned to the library alone under the pretense of a broken boiler system. He knew how to override the alarm. With only his flashlight and master keys, he moved through the silent halls with practiced steps. He listened at every corner, checked each room, his breath fogging faintly in the air. Then he heard it, a creak, downstairs. He moved to the basement slowly, one hand on the rail, careful not to let his footsteps echo. The basement was old, mostly used for storage now. Boxes of outdated books, broken computers, holiday decorations from events long forgotten. But Raymond knew every inch of it. Or at least, he thought he did. He turned the final corner and stopped. A heavy shelving unit had been pushed a few feet to the left. The wall behind it was different. Dusty, yes, but with scrape marks on the floor beneath. Something had been moved recently. His flashlight swept across the wall again, then landed on it. A door, metal, rusted, blending almost seamlessly into the gray cinder block behind it. No knob, only a keyhole. Raymond stepped forward slowly, memories flickering at the edge of his mind. There had been rumors long ago of extra wings in the building. Spaces sealed off after funding cuts. He'd always dismissed them. But this was real. He reached into his belt pouch and pulled out the ring of keys. One by one, he tried them, each click echoing in the stale air. Finally, the 6th key turned with a groan. The door creaked open an inch. Then more. The room behind it breathed dust and old paper. Raymond stepped inside, his flashlight revealing shelves filled with untouched books, thick with time. The furniture was covered in sheets, but it was all intact. Wooden chairs, armchairs with faded cushions, even a large desk near the far wall. A long-forgotten reading room. He stepped farther in, his boots leaving clean marks on the floor. The air was cold but dry. Along the back wall, he saw an old radiator. He knelt beside it and turned the valve. It shuddered, but a moment later, warm air began to hum through the space. For a long time, he stood there, unmoving. It felt as if he had stepped into someone else's memory. The next night, he came back with purpose. This time, he didn't announce his return. He parked 2 blocks away and entered through the side service door, key in hand. He moved quietly down the stairs, flashlight off, his ears tuned to the silence. And there, in the far corner of the stacks, he saw them, 2 small figures, curled together under a patchwork of blankets and coats, hidden in a narrow space between shelves. The boy stirred first, eyes opening wide, hands instantly moving to shield the girl. "Don't move," Raymond said softly, raising a hand. "I'm not calling anyone." The boy didn't speak. His eyes were sharp with fear, protective. The girl, smaller, clutched something to her chest. A toy, Raymond thought. "You've been here a while, haven't you?" Raymond said, taking a cautious step forward. "I found your apple." Still no answer. "I don't know your names," he continued, "but I have a room. It's warm, hidden. You can stay there, just until we figure this out." The boy didn't lower his guard, but his eyes flicked to the girl beside him. She was shivering. Raymond waited. Finally, the boy stood. Not fully, but enough to show willingness. He nodded once. "This way," Raymond said, and turned without looking back. He led them through the halls in silence, past corners they had only tiptoed through at night, and into the old basement. When he opened the iron door, the warm air met them immediately. The girl looked up at the soft hum of the heater, then at the dusty shelves bathed in golden light. Raymond gestured to the armchairs. "You can rest there tonight. I'll bring food, blankets, but you can't leave this room without me knowing." The boy still didn't speak, but he helped his sister toward the cushions. She sank into one without hesitation. Raymond stepped back. "Tomorrow we talk." As he closed the door, locking it again from the outside, he leaned against the wall and let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Something had changed. He didn't know what exactly, but it was already too late to turn away. The sound he'd heard that night had not just led him to a hidden room. It had led him into something far deeper. And for the first time in a long while, Raymond didn't feel so alone. By the third morning, the abandoned room no longer felt like a secret, but a sanctuary. The dust had been swept, the radiator hummed steadily, and the lingering muss of forgotten decades was slowly replaced with the smell of peanut butter sandwiches and instant cocoa. Raymond came early and stayed late, operating on the periphery of the library's routines. He cleaned with precision, always keeping one ear tuned to the silence behind the basement walls. Eli was the first to adapt. His instincts didn't rest, even as he began to trust the man who had offered them shelter. He monitored everything. How many steps Raymond took on the stairs, the time it took him to return with food, the exact minute the library staff clocked out. He memorized patterns, looking for cracks. But Raymond didn't offer any. He was consistent, predictable, and, strangely, kind in a way that wasn't loud or obvious. He never asked too much. He didn't smile much either. But he noticed things, like when Naomi's cough deepened and her breaths became shallow at night, or how Eli watched the hallway from the crack in the basement door every time he left the room. Naomi, on the other hand, softened more quickly. She clung to her stuffed rabbit and whispered to the books on the shelves. She spent hours exploring the titles, tracing the gold lettering on the spines, even if she couldn't read them all. She asked Raymond questions when he visited, about the heating pipes, about the stars on the ceiling that glowed faintly in the dark, about why the armchairs had wheels on their legs. He answered in his usual, gravelly voice, short but not unkind. On the fourth night, after returning from a late grocery run, Raymond found Eli sitting upright by the heater, arms crossed tightly over his chest. "You didn't come back when you said," Eli muttered, his voice edged with suspicion. "Got held up. Roads were closed near 5th Street. Water main break." Eli didn't respond, just stared at the floor. Raymond set the brown bag on the desk. "Soup, crackers, cough syrup for your sister." There was a long silence before Eli finally asked, "Why are you helping us?" Raymond paused, then leaned against the edge of a nearby table. "I don't have a good answer. Maybe because someone should." Eli narrowed his eyes. "Most people don't." Raymond didn't argue. He simply pulled a chair close, opened a can of soup, and poured it into a dented thermos. He handed it to the boy, who took it slowly, still watching. Naomi stirred under a blanket in the corner. "Is it chicken noodle?" she asked weakly. "Best kind," Raymond said. The room settled into a familiar quiet. In a city filled with noise and chaos, the forgotten basement had become something almost sacred. Suspended in time, removed from everything above. But peace, Eli knew, was never built to last. And sure enough, the cracks began to show. Ms. Harris, the director of the library, was not a woman who tolerated change. She was tall, meticulous, and walked with a click of hard heels that echoed through the building like a warning. She had noticed small things: extra light usage at night, a shift in the boiler's energy patterns, a faint footprint near a staff-only corridor. She had called a staff meeting and requested a full inventory of the building's energy logs. Raymond heard the announcement during his morning shift. His stomach clenched the way it hadn't in years. He returned to the basement immediately afterward, face tight with concern. "They're going to inspect the lower levels," he said, voice low. "Probably next week. Maybe sooner." Eli's eyes widened. "You said no one ever comes down here." "I said almost never. But things change, and if she finds you—" "We'll be gone before that happens," Eli said. Standing up, "We've done it before." Raymond frowned. "You don't get it. Naomi isn't healthy. You can't move her now. Her breathing's worse." Eli's jaw tightened. "Then what do we do?" Raymond looked around the room. The old bookcases, the makeshift bedding, the tiny heater ticking in the corner. He had thought it could last longer. He had hoped, foolishly, that maybe this could hold. "There's a way," he said slowly, his mind turning. "We make it look like a storage restoration project. Reclassify the room. Set up enough documentation to justify activity down here." Eli blinked. "How would that help?" "If it looks like library business, no one will ask questions. I'll do the paperwork. I'll get old records from the archives. Call it a historical preservation wing." Naomi, coughing in her sleep, made a soft sound. Eli glanced toward her, then back at Raymond. "You'd lie for us?" Raymond met his gaze. "I already have." They worked quickly. Raymond began bringing boxes from the storage attic, old books, and used signage, even a broken projector. He stacked them carefully in corners, added notes with forged dates and labels. He even printed mock restoration schedules and posted them on the back of the library staff door. Eli helped, moving with practiced stealth, watching corridors, timing each trip. It was a risk every time, but he never hesitated. Naomi stayed in the hidden room, wrapped in wool blankets, sketching with dull pencils Raymond had found in a drawer. 3 days later, Raymond brought her a small inhaler. "Borrowed it from the clinic," he said gruffly, placing it gently beside her. She didn't ask questions. She simply smiled, used it, and then held the rabbit close. That night, Eli lingered longer than usual after Raymond's visit. "You were a dad, weren't you?" he asked suddenly. Raymond looked up. "How do you know that? You talk like someone who misses something." Raymond didn't answer right away. "I had a son. Lost him when he was 15. Eli stared at him. "How?" "Different kind of accident. My fault. I wasn't there when I should have been." Neither of them spoke for a long time. Finally, Eli said, "You're here now." And then he returned to his sister's side, curling beneath the blankets as the radiator ticked on. Raymond stood in the doorway for several minutes after that, staring at the two small figures in the dim light. There had been no reason to turn the key in that old door. But now, it felt like something inevitable, like the room had waited for them all along. The inspection notice came earlier than expected. A printed memo, stapled to the corkboard in the staff lounge, announced that the director herself would conduct a full walkthrough of all library facilities the following Monday morning, citing discrepancies in operational data and irregularities in overnight utility consumption. Raymond read it once and didn't need to read it again. He felt the tightness return to his chest, the one that no amount of pacing could loosen. He waited until the end of the shift to tell Eli. The boy didn't react the way Raymond had feared. No panic, no anger, just a firm set to his jaw as he processed the words. He looked toward Naomi, asleep again on the pile of blankets, her chest rising and falling in shallow, uneven breaths. "She's getting worse," Eli said quietly. Raymond nodded. "I've been trying to find a doctor, someone who won't ask questions, but I haven't had any luck. No one does anything off the books anymore. Not for kids. I'm not leaving without her," Eli said, already on edge. "I'm not asking you to," Raymond replied, leaning against the wall, arms crossed. Silence stretched between them. What do we do then? Eli asked at last. Raymond exhaled slowly. We keep the room looking like a renovation project. Ms. Harris isn't the kind of person who likes to get her hands dirty. If it looks like a mess, she'll take a few notes and move on. But it has to be convincing. And you two can't be here when she walks through. Where would we go? There's a crawl space behind the furnace. It's not comfortable, but it's hidden. You'll need to stay there until she's gone. No movement. No sound. Eli hesitated, then nodded once. We can do that. In the following days, the basement transformed from a hidden refuge into a chaotic, curated construction zone. Raymond borrowed tools he didn't need and scattered them across the room. He hauled down paint cans and left open blueprints on the desk. He printed fake work orders and pinned them to clipboards, attaching them to the rusted filing cabinet that once stood useless in the corner. Old floor tiles, broken chairs, and cables were laid out with just enough disorder to look official. Eli, with his sharp eye for detail, made suggestions. A coffee mug on the shelf here, a safety notice taped crookedly to a beam there. Naomi, though still weak, insisted on helping. She cleaned books with damp cloths and stacked them near the entrance as if part of an inventory process. Her small hands moved slowly, but she smiled as she worked. But time was not on their side. Naomi's cough deepened into the kind that clawed at her ribs. Her appetite waned. Her energy faded fast. Raymond watched helplessly, guilt creeping in at the edges. Every moment spent forging documents or staging props felt like a moment stolen for what she actually needed. Real medical care, real safety. On the eve of the inspection, Raymond returned to room after hours with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. Inside were 3 items: a burner phone, a bottle of prescription cough medication, and a child-sized inhaler, legally expired but still viable. He placed them gently on the desk. I had to call in favors, he said, meeting Eli's eyes. It wasn't easy. Eli examined the items one by one, then gave a quiet nod of gratitude, not trusting himself to speak. She needs to see a doctor, Raymond added softly. Soon. Eli lowered his eyes. I know. The next morning, just after 8 o'clock, Raymond arrived early. He checked every lock, every hallway. He gave Naomi a dose of the medication and helped her into the narrow space behind the furnace. She was quiet, holding her rabbit tightly. Eli climbed in after her, whispering reassurances and promises he couldn't be sure he could keep. You remember the signals? Raymond asked. Eli nodded. 3 knocks meant all clear. 2 meant wait. He closed the crawl space panel with deliberate care and turned back toward the main room. He adjusted a crooked sign, rearranged a tarp over a shelf, and then ascended the stairs just in time to hear Ms. Harris's voice approaching from the east hallway. She walked briskly, clipboard in hand, her assistant trailing behind with a tablet. She wore her usual expression, a mix of irritation and precision, as if she were perpetually cleaning up a mess she hadn't made. We'll start with the archives, then move to sublevel 1, she said, not acknowledging Raymond when she passed him. He fell into step behind them, quiet. The inspection was methodical. She made notes, asked curt questions about humidity sensors and cataloging systems, and raised an eyebrow at a minor leak near the boiler. Finally, she turned toward the basement. Why is this door labeled Restoration Zone? She asked, pointing to the sign Raymond had nailed in place 2 days before. We're reviving an old reading room, Raymond said smoothly. Historical preservation grant. Low priority work, but it's in motion. She sniffed. No one informed me. It's not officially listed yet. Still waiting on funding confirmation. She considered this for a moment, then opened the door. The air was warmer than the rest of the building. Dust hovered in faint shafts of light. The clutter looked authentic. Books stacked, tools scattered, wire spools along the wall. It was just chaotic enough to discourage a deeper inspection. She stepped carefully around the edges, glancing once at the blueprints on the desk, once at the open file cabinet. Who approved this? She asked. I filed the paperwork last month. It's in the system. Her assistant tapped at the tablet, confirming. Fine, she said finally. Just make sure the fire marshal clears it. We can't afford a citation. Of course. She didn't linger. Within 5 minutes, they were back upstairs. Raymond waited until he heard the sound of her office door close before he descended again. He tapped twice, then 3 times. The panel slid open and Eli emerged, helping Naomi out behind him. She was pale, shaking slightly but conscious. "You're both okay?" Raymond asked. Eli nodded. She stayed quiet. "We're good." Raymond didn't say anything else. He just stepped aside, letting them walk back into the room that had become theirs. That night, after Naomi fell asleep, Eli sat near the heater, watching the glow of the coils. "She's not going to make it through another winter," he said finally. Raymond sat across from him, silent. "I've been thinking," Eli continued, "about what happens next. We can't keep hiding. But I don't trust the system." "Neither do I." Eli looked up, eyes steady. "There has to be another way." Raymond nodded slowly, his voice quiet. "Then we'll find it." The unlikely alliance, forged in the shadows of forgotten walls, was now bound by something deeper than necessity. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were beginning to hope. And hope, Raymond knew, was a dangerous thing. But maybe, just maybe, it was also the only thing that could change everything. The morning sunlight slanted to the library's tall windows as Ms. Harris's footsteps echoed down the carpeted hallway, retracing the path of an inspection she barely, or perhaps intentionally, ignored. Her clipboard lay folded beside the entrance of the newly labeled restoration zone, and yet in spite of everything, silence reigned. The clutter had done its job. The staged disorder, the legitimacy of historical preservation, and Raymond's meticulous forgery had created a facade solid enough to stop curiosity in its tracks. As she departed, neither Eli nor Naomi stirred from their hidden refuge. Behind the locked iron door, the heater's gentle hum warmed the quiet breaths and soft pulse of sibling trust. And beyond that moment, the real test of their fragile sanctuary was just beginning. Ms. Harris paused at the top of the wooden stairs, her gaze scanning the hallway, her lips pressed in. She sighed, raising a note of concern buried beneath her composed exterior. Librarianship rarely demanded this kind of confrontation with the unspoken, but today, something stirred in her, a wariness of unshared truths, the weight of unacknowledged kindness. Raymond watched from below, heart thundering. He had engineered this illusion to protect them, with the risk that it might become their prison. That evening, after the last patron and staff member departed, Ms. Harris returned unexpectedly. She'd forgotten a folder, she claimed, but her posture carried something unspoken. A hesitation, a seeking. She ascended the stairs and paused again outside the hidden door. "Raymond," she said quietly, "thank you for preparing this room." Her voice was hesitant, softened. "I've been thinking." She glanced at the sign, then at the messy tableau beyond the gap. Blueprints curling at the edges, dust motes dancing in the light. Maybe it's time this space learned to breathe again. Raymond held his breath. Did she see the truth? That the room was already breathing. With Naomi's fragile life and Eli's guarded hope, the next day, Ms. Harris arrived with boxes in her hands. To everyone's surprise, Raymond included, she carried children's books, colorful picture books, plush cushions, story-time props. Her urgency contained a tremor. "We're reopening this as a children's reading room," she announced, turning toward the iron door. "A real one, community-oriented. We'll call it the Hideaway." She placed the books on a cart, alongside blankets and soft rugs. I want it to be for families in need," she added, "for kids who need a safe place." Raymond stared at her, stunned. Was she offering more than forgiveness? A transformation rooted not in paperwork but compassion? He opened his mouth, the words strangled between gratitude and disbelief. Eli and Naomi emerged first from the secret room when the door was unlocked the next evening, blinking in the glow of lamps, arms wrapped around each other. Naomi's cough had quieted, though she still clutched her rabbit, its coat clean, its missing ears stitched with careful hope. Both stared at the transformation. Low pillows spilled across thick rugs, books arranged in neat stacks, walls adorned with soft lighting. The door that had concealed them now stood ajar, welcoming. Ms. Harris watched in the corner, arms folded, her expression fierce with determination. She stepped forward slowly, then knelt before the children. "This is for you," she said. Eli knelt in return. "Ambassadors," he said quietly. Their voices trembled slightly. Naomi's more, Eli's steadier, braced by responsibility. Ms. Harris nodded. "Yes, you'll help me welcome others. You'll help me choose the next books." She reached into her coat and produced a small notebook and pen. "Journal this. Write what you like to see here. Stories you love. Ideas to make this your own." Naomi's eyes lit up. She touched the soft illustrations of a storybook about stars. Her finger traced a night sky on the cover as she whispered to Raymond, "I want to read that." Eli stood, glancing at Raymond. The older man nodded, his shoulders softening for the first time. He brushed a strand of hair from Naomi's forehead, and she let him. Over the next weeks, the hideaway became more than a makeshift safe zone. It became a living space where the library's missing wing pulsed with meaning. Parents attended informal story hours. Children curled into beanbags while librarians read tales of imagination. Local nonprofits donated art supplies and board games. Neighborhood cafes dropped off cookies and juice boxes. A little free library was installed near the entrance, an adjacent miniature kiosk for takeaway books, a tangible extension of community spirit being nurtured inside. littlefreelibrary.org, southernliving.com. Raymond, once invisible, became a guide, helping children navigate shelves, repairing worn chairs, and lending an ear when silence weighed too heavy. Naomi blossomed in the sanctuary. Her cough quieted, her laughter returned in whispers, laughter that echoed between bookshelves. Eli accepted reading help from a volunteer teacher. While finishing a sketch of their memory, the iron door half open, light spilling from the hidden wing. Ms. Harris walked down those rows one evening and paused a small framed photo someone had placed on a shelf. A snapshot of two children asleep among bookshelves, the iron door slightly ajar behind them. Below, someone had written in neat lettering, "A door forgotten becomes new beginnings." She pressed a finger against it, tears held back by professionalism and hope. The library's heart had changed. The door that once sealed secrets now stood open. The hidden wing, once a refuge of necessity, had become a public haven. The partnership between a caretaker, two invisible children, and a wary director had grown into something stronger, a community rooted in empathy and literature, built from invisible lives re-seen. The transformation rippled outward. The neighborhood began to see the library not just as accumulation of books, but as a home. The director named a community board. Naomi helped arrange craft nights. Eli began to speak in quiet, thoughtful sentences, his trust rediscovering itself in each page turned. Raymond found purpose in opening doors again, this time not to hide, but to include. And the iron door remained forever unlocked. The forgotten door had indeed changed everything.